From the years 2008 to 2011, Jean-Luc studied theology at the Universidad Pontificia Comillas in Madrid, obtaining a Bachelor of Theology and a licentiate in ecclesiastical studies. He was ordained a priest in his hometown of Ewondo in 2012, as he was still working for the completion of his licentiate in sacred theology here at the Boston College Clough School of Theology and Ministry. Though it was not the Clough School at that time, it has subsequently become that. Jean-Luc completed a doctorate in church history and hermeneutics at Boston University down the road. His doctoral research examined the Jesuit presence in West Africa, with particular attention to the tensions around Africanization in the decades following World War II. Following graduation from Boston University in 2018, Dr. Enyegue was sent as a Jesuit formator at Hekima University College in Nairobi, serving initially as professor of church history and associate director of the Jesuit Historical Institute in Africa. Since 2020, he is the director of the same institute and cumulatively serves as the spiritual father of the Jesuit Theology. Dr. Enyegue's scholarship focuses on the history of Christianity in Africa, the role of Jesuits in colonial and post-colonial contexts, and the challenges of preserving Jesuit identity in mission and collecting, preserving, and exploiting African church archives. Through his research, teaching, and leadership at the Jesuit Historical Institute in Nairobi and Hekima University College, Dr. Enyegue has become an important voice in rethinking the place of Africa in global Catholic and Jesuit history. We are delighted to welcome him back to Boston College campus. One of our own, please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
A Jesuit always comes back home, and that's what we say. So I am happy to be here, to be back home. I thank you very much, Mick, for your generous presentation. It has been a while since I have not been in Boston, and especially here at BC. And I would like to stay where we are and just take a minute of silence, because there are many people who are following this conversation from heaven, and so that we can just be here and feel their presence. In Africa, we believe that the dead are still alive and that you are with us. So just take a moment to bring in our memory the lives of Tom Stegman, Brad Schaeffer, Francine Kahneman, Anus Daniel, Bill Berry, Bill Russell, Mama Wale. May the good Lord grant them eternal peace. So as I thank you, Mick, for the introduction, I also want to express my gratitude to the wonderful team behind you. You really made sure that I had a very comfortable trip. And since I have been here, you have made sure that I had what I needed, including some time to pray. So I thank you. I thank Megan, Cara, Gandalf, Joel, and all the team who has worked so well to make this day possible. Please, can you give them a round of applause? I also acknowledge all of you who made it here and those who are following online. It will be a full lecture to appreciate your mentorship, As I was at Mass today, I could see some of my professors remind the exact course I took with them, the kind of conversation we were having. And I can see this room as a room full of wisdom. So I can see my thesis director here, advisor, Dana Robert, and the BU team. So make, so there is a BU delegation here. I can see Sister Meg, who has always been there. Many of you, I will not really have time to name you. I thank you for your friendship and companionship. I see Lafarge community here. I see Katie Moni there. I see so this room is really, I am overwhelmed. And the only feeling I have right now is a feeling of gratitude. So thank you. I cannot write the history of my last 17 years without your faces. And by the way, the ink of that history will not be red. It will be green, full of hope and gratitude. I can see that even Father Magri is already growing gray hair, gray beard. So we are here together in the classroom together. So thank you very much. And you can clap for yourself for being here. Now let's go directly to the boring part. And the boring part has to do with the presentation, the lecture I have to present to you tonight. The title, as you can see, is The Wisdom of Nya Modo and Afro-globalization. In today's discussion on global Christianity, scholars increasingly ask how Africa and African perspective might shape the future of the church. A telling moment for me occurred in a class on wisdom literature with Daniel J. Harrington. During a discussion on lady wisdom in the book of Proverbs, Dan turned to the very culturally diverse and international group of students. More than a decade earlier, one student remarked, Carol Fontaine had challenged the femininity of lady wisdom. I quote, though lady wisdom might speak in an F female voice, even though personified as she, does she really do she things, or perhaps he things? Dan let the conversation flow when another student intervened. I am attracted by the fluidity of her gender, she said. As I relate with the fluidity of her gender, it also connects me deeply with Jesus, wisdom incarnate, in whom I find the same fluidity. The student had barely finished the last sentence that a third one interrupted her rather harshly. Stop it, he said to his classmate. Jesus was a man, and full stop. In the middle of that intra-American debate, the third student, who was a friend of mine, turned to me, eventually in search of approval. He would later tell me that he did not expect receive the reaction he expected from me. For in that class, the reaction of most African students to the debate was far from uniform. Many preferred to let their American peers argue among themselves, considering questions such as the gender of Jesus irrelevant to the urgent concerns of African Christianity, where issues of food and basic needs, peace and reconciliation take precedence. This perspective remained common until clearer positions began to surface after Pope Francis' fiducia supplicans in 2023. A question remained following the class debate. Why did my American friend turn to me in search of approval? And why did I remain unimpressed? The question is relevant because it encapsulates, this is the power of conversation at BC. Yeah? So you can see myself here and my good friend, Susan Reynolds, who has received this award as well. But the debate is not among us. It is other students. So it encapsulates the tension in global Christianity, in which Africa is becoming central, and yet Africa remains misunderstood, at times otherized. That the friends sought for my approval during the exchange revealed underlying assumptions about Africans in global Christianity, particularly the tendency to align African Christianity with the ideological right on issues like gender and sexual morality. A year before the class debate in 2011, Philip Jenkins has published his next Christendom, The Coming Global Christianity. It is a book most of us read and commented upon, and that book introduced most American students in the class to the Africanness of this coming Christendom in terms that rather appeal to the American right. In the book, Jenkins remarked, not just within the Roman Catholic Church, religious conservatives are looking southward with happy expectations. Most of the reasons for this involve dispute over gender and sexuality. On issues of homosexuality, to a chasm divides the world's religious communities, nowhere more visibly than in contemporary Africa, unquote. Meanwhile, in the African side of the conversation, a recent book by David Ngong shows a widening gap within the global communion between Africans and the rest, a gap that explains Africans' reaction to the class debate. Ngong uses Leopold Sédar Senghor's poem Noirs Hosties, The Black Host, to make a case of a new African sacramental theology. In the poem, Senghor makes manifest a skewed vision of creation in which Africa is consecrated and eaten on the table of global selfish interests. As if by a metaphor, Ngong argues, black host can only produce black masses, literally satanic and diabolic. Rather than creating communities of communion, these black masses divide, they kill, and they cannibalize. They are but acts of witchcraft, whose orchestration is quick to call black a skin color that is only black through the projection of their powerful creators' dark designs. Put side by side, Jenkins and Ngong paint a picture of a global church that is standing on two ideological and social spectra, talking at instead of talking to each other. In this short presentation, I intend to bring a new perspective that can help bridge that gap. I do not claim to be exhaustive, but to open a window for conversations to help us engage the rising brown Christianity which Africa represents, not from fear based on wrong expectations, but from the richness of African culture, especially drawn from who Africans think they are or aspire to be, or for the hope they represent for global Christianity. My basic thesis is the following. The paradox of what David Ngong calls Senghor's Eucharist, the divide within the Christian communion, is not based on the lack of a common and shared faith, but on historical stereotypes reinforced by the cultural and class gaps that estrange those sharing the same faith. Although faith travels with peoples, as Mark Gornick argues, it is because people travel first that faith travels with them. Therefore, as we reflect on the role Africans are playing and might play in the coming Christendom, the cross-cultural bridge is to be built less on the faith of people who share the same baptism, the same doctrines, and often speak the same liturgical language, share institutional canons and ways of proceedings. This bridge is to be built instead on cultures beyond that faith, on things that keep people, even those of the same faith, estranged from one another because of not knowing each other or wrong expectations. As Jenkins rightly acknowledges, people differ in their cultural expression, and what works in one cultural setting won't in another. To take an obvious example, many Northern Europeans tend to view dancing and swaying as inappropriate for a solemn or religious setting, while Africans regard such physical movements as perfectly normal. Fears about the emerging global Christianity, in which Africa is becoming a center, at least numerically, are not based on faith opposition. They are instead based on a limited, often erroneous understanding of Africa as Africa, in the genuineness of its culture. Here I introduce the concept of Nya Modo, Ewondo concept of Nya Modo, personhood. Nya Modo literally means mother of man, and man here is the human person. But being saved, the inclusivity, man makes sense as we will see later, mother of man, because Nya Modo often applies to the male in society. Nya Modo is here a hermeneutical key for rethinking wisdom, rethinking personhood and mission in global Christianity. It is the very essence of a human person in the Ewondo culture, a vocation and ultimate horizon of the life mission of all humanity, defined as life-giving, life-nurturing, and life-protecting. I have three main points. The first is to propose an anthropological and theological meaning of Nya Modo. Then I will present Nya Modo as a form of African Christian humanism by using Angelbert Veng's way of the cross. And finally, I will see how Nya Modo can appeal to global Christianity. The anthropological and theological meaning of Nya Modo confirms the fluidity of gender roles in all wisdom. The fluidity of gender roles in wisdom literature was a familiar reality for the Ewondo student that I was. A culture in which both men and women are revered, and that places a woman's attribute at the very essence of an accomplished human being, Nya Modo. From this background, the feminine at times appears as the thing that is closer to the divine. We know it from scripture, in the books of Proverbs and Berserk and so forth. Wisdom is pre-existent, created before ages, subordinated to the highest God, yet of divine origin. Wisdom participates in God's work of creation with the universal reach. In the assembly of the Most High, we read in Sirach 24, verse 2, wisdom opens her mouth, in the presence of his host, she declares her word. Even the book of Genesis confirms in Eve that the woman was the one thing God created that is closest to God. For she is the last to be created, and she's created from a more refined material, a human rib, and with the power to give birth and create the human family. And we have this pattern in the whole history of salvation, where we see powerful women again and again rising to the challenge of helping God save the human race. Women are the one who saved and named Moses. Ruth, a Moabite, is the great-grandmother of King David, and the list can go on and on and on until we heard Professor Therese Okure recently. This is an African woman biblical scholar, who recently reminded us in a conference in Nairobi that Elizabeth, who has no liturgical feast in the church calendar, was actually the very first one to be filled with the Holy Spirit and to receive a visit of baby Jesus when he was still in the womb of her mother Mary, who is known as full of grace, the one who gave birth to God's Son, naming and mothering God's Son. From this short biblical overview, which does not claim to be strongly exegetical, I would like to argue that giving birth mothering, nurturing, protecting life can be considered distinctive to human vocation, including in my culture and especially to male vocation. The concept of Nya Modo in Ewondo society embodies the role of a mother of men and women, a figure who gives and sustains life through care, nurturing, and social relationship. Anthropologist Philippe Labulle-Tolra situates this role within the framework of intergenerational tensions, especially between fathers and sons, elders and youth, with a patriarchal system, within a patriarchal system in which Nya Modo is the culmination of authority, symbolizing the man who has succeeded in founding a village and ensuring the continuity of family and tradition. This structure, Labulle-Tolra argues, is built on obedience. The initiate gains social life through submission, while disobedience, which is proper to the non-initiate, risks marginalization and social death. In Labulle-Tolra's view, the system reinforces gendered tensions between femme, and femme is the male individual, and minga, the woman, with women defined by submission and men by toughness and independence. Yet the Ewondo social reality proves more complex than Labulle-Tolra's binary categories. While he emphasizes opposition between men and women, there are liminal figures that blur these roles in society. Some men, for example, are called femme minga, cross into traditionally female spaces, and are sometimes derided as effeminate and unfit for leadership. Like Lady Wisdom, they are considered Jesuit, which means no man, a nobody, unable to give life or to establish families or villages. Conversely, some women, minga femme, take on roles typically assigned to men. In their household, they are wearing trousers. That's an expression to say that they are the one commanding. They defend ancestral land and command respect through wealth, wisdom, or the accomplishments of their children. These women upset strict patriarchal lines, becoming powerful actors in their own rights, despite social tendency to understate their authority. Far from being passive, Ewondo women have historically held central position of influence. In what is considered a patrilineal society, those women can be Nkunkuma, chiefs, recognized as Nya Modo or Nyaminga, mothers of men and women, such as Marie-Thérèse Catherine Tangana, who was chief of the Ewondo and the Benin, and to the right there, we have Jackie Muriel Eyono-Wono, who is chief of the Luc Enyegue. In her case, Atangana was the daughter of a great chief, who as a novelist and congresswoman was also successful in her own right. Women in that particular culture gained prestige as founding wives, storytellers, healers, ritual leaders, or moral authorities sought out for arbitration. Even when sterile, they held communal importance through leadership in women's associations, Bikwan. Mothers and mothers-in-law commanded reverence, often exercising power over sons and even husbands. In all these capacities, women were recognized as life givers and village builders, integral to sustaining the Ewondo society. Thus, Nya Modo, far from being only a patriarchal title, encompasses both men and women who nurture, who guide, and ensure the survival of their communities. The wise person par excellence, especially the male wise, the most accomplished in society, is called Nya Modo, and they have to prove themselves to be one, which is not the case for women, because it is taken for granted. Nya Modo distinguishes himself or herself as the mother of men and women, and not being mother in society makes you a nobody, as is a mod. Second point, This is nobody. Okay. So Nya Modo and African Christian humanism in Mveng's Way of the Cross. Angel Mveng is the first Cameroonian Jesuit who was a historian, theologian, and a poet with a strong impact on African Christianity. African Christologies often depict Jesus as healer, as ancestor, elder brother, liberator, warrior, or initiator. Roles akin to the Nya Modo in the Ewondo society. For Nya Modo gives birth, feeds, sustains, protects, and reconciles. In his Si quelqu'un, Chemin de Croix, which is basically his way of the cross, Mveng portrays Africa as a crucified, yes, maternal Africa, bearing the world's hope. His theology configures crucifixion as mothering, extending Mveng's African cosmology into ecclesial solidarity. In the second station of the cross, Mveng presents Africa as a cross set upon the world, a wood of universal salvation that teaches not only the science of suffering, but also the science of love and forgiveness. He invokes the image of Africa as fraternal and maternal. Your brother's face emerging from the forests of fraternal Africa, the Africa of suffering and patience, to carry with me this wood of total life and forgiveness. But I will teach you, in the heart I build for my children all over the world, the sweetness of carrying on yourself the roof of hope, the heaviness of the day, the anguish of all men and women. Here Mveng contrasts Africa, the cradle of humanity that bears the struggles and hopes of all her children, with the modern technological cradles that victimize them. With your two arms, I quote, of suffering, prayer, and forgiveness, the despair of the Superman, devoid by his bubbles, his child's wailing in his cradle or Sputnik, unquote. This new humanism is symbolized first by Simon of Cyrene in the fifth station. Simon represents, for Mveng, all human beings who are not understood, who do not understand themselves, but who carry within them a great note of silence where God sings melodies unknown to other men, unquote. Yet Mveng immediately crowns this humanism with the figure of a Veronica in the sixth station. As she wipes the face of Jesus, he sees in her gesture, the revelation of true human dignity. Every face of man told of us of your face, every smile of man imitated your smile, and every tear, every wrinkle on the brow of man suffering drew for us your resemblance. But it is your face, Lord, your divine face that we seek. The motherly face appears when Jesus, in the eighth station, consoles the weeping women. These women are at once Africans and universal. Women of Africa, women of Jerusalem, where the blood of Palestinians and Jews mixes, the blood of the sons of the God of Abraham. They represent the voice of Rachel rising from Ramah and addressing them directly. Mveng insists, women, do not weep for me. You daughters of Africa, I name you daughters of my Jerusalem. And you are the fence shedding this heavy pilgrimage. I say to you, you sorrowful face of maternal Africa, tell me the story of my feminine Africa. Women, tell it to me, unquote. From this point, Denti, the Lord of the Forest, assumes feminine traits, embodying, like the African woman, the work of suffering humanity. That is the work of those, I quote, for whom civilization, money, politics, or customs have stifled the call within them of the gospel, unquote. Mveng imagines a new ecumenism that is not primarily doctrinal but social, forged under the shadow of those whom civilization excludes and forgets. This new ecumenism is highlighted at the 10th station, symbolized by Christ's seamless robe. The robe becomes a sign of unity across religion, across cultures and regions. woven by women as a garment of sisterhood for the forgotten of globalization. Your seamless robe, it is your mother who wove it for you with her slender fingers, according to the art and technique and tradition of the ancestors. Lord Jesus, grant us to be naked and free Africa, which gives itself to your love, so that every man made solitary by the hatred of man finds in you the fraternal rendezvous of all hearts, unquote. Basically, in the middle of the Cold War, Mveng is denouncing the distracting noise of technological empires, which conceal the real ecumene, the common melody of the forgotten. At the 12th station, he points to the futility of superpower rivalries. They claim to be at war with each other, but their science is the same and produces the same, at times, deadly effect. The lament of the suffering humanity finds its truest voice in the mother. Only a mother can hear the cries of her children in this world dominated by mechanical and technological noise. In the 13th station, the mother becomes the scale weighing the world's redemption. And here we are, I quote, peeled upon you like bodies abandoned without burial. In your arms, here from everywhere is the desperate flight of those who have no refuge. In your arms, where lies the ransom of our humanity? Here we are, running like prodigal sons. For Mveng, the crucified and the wretch of the earth are all children of mother wisdom. The 14th century lifts the eyes of all toward her, the peace one, the mother of redemption. And we have turned our gaze to you from all the horizons of the ecumene, toward you whom we have pierced. In this way, Mveng's poetic theology, written in the context of the debate over Africanization, sees Christian salvation through African women's lenses. Theology, anthropology, ecclesiology, soteriology, eschatology, all bear a woman's face, sometimes weeping for slaughtered children, often extending songs and melodies of hope and solidarity to all mothers, especially those of biblical Israel and Palestine. The horizon of the human person as Nya Modo, mother of man, has always been Nya Minga, mother of woman, never solitary but communal, for she embodies a new ecumene of the wretch of the earth, an Ubuntu that carries the hope of a world reborn in love, justice, forgiveness, reconciliation, and abundance. In her, in Nya Modo, humanity is in fact depatriarchalized, for all people are called to become mothers. In Balafon, another of Mveng's poetic works, this vision of ecumenism extends to the poor and the wealthy alike, from Paris, New York, and Moscow to the ancient civilizations of Moctezuma. All these people are summoned to Africa not to exploit or lament, but to encounter one another anew and to rediscover the humanity that technological and militaristic culture have obscured. They come to Africa to find again the hope that saves, Spe Salvi. My third point, Nya Modo's appeal for global Christianity. Mveng's maternal motive draws from 19th century Ethiopianism and the African diaspora, and it was reinforced or reclaimed in the 21st century with the magisterium, especially of Pope Benedict XVI. Ethiopia's global claim is very known to all of us. For any discussion on the global reach of African Christianity, almost inevitably begins with Ethiopia. Tradition attributes to St. Mark the apostolic founding of the church in Alexandria, while the Acts of the Apostles recounts the conversion of the Ethiopian eunuch, most likely a court official from Merowe in present-day war-torn Sudan. That story, already interpreted as the first expansion of Christianity beyond the boundaries of Israel and Egypt, has continued its trajectory into modern diasporas, including the Ethiopian Orthodox churches established, let's say, in New York today. The Ethiopian eunuch in Acts chapter 8, a high-ranking official serving the Candace, queen of the Ethiopian, travels to Jerusalem in search of God and is baptized by Philip. This episode unfolds against a backdrop of persecution following the martyrdom of Stephen, as Christians are forced to migrate, scattered, and forced to preach the word across new territories. The eunuch's conversion thus symbolizes the transmission of Christianity beyond its initial Jewish and Mediterranean sphere into the African kingdom of Aksum. Confronted with the racial discrimination of mission churches and the aggressive European nationalisms that fueled the partition of Africa in the 19th century, Ethiopianist leaders sought independence. Yet, as they distanced themselves from Western institutions, their churches remain close to mission models in organization, dogma, liturgies. Faith itself was never the dividing line. What set Ethiopianism apart was its hopeful vision, crystallized in the writings of someone like Henry McNeill Turner or Edward Wilmot Bladen. Turner, bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, proclaimed that God must be black, that the enslavement of Africans was part of divine providence. They were destined to return as missionaries for Africa's redemption, but also to guide the world with African Americans as God's chosen instrument. Yet it was with Edward Wilmot Bladen who laid the intellectual foundations for Africa's 21st century role in global Christianity was really shaped. A West Indian by birth, and later a leading Pan-Africanist scholar and politician in West Africa, Bladen envisioned Africa as a spiritual conservatory for the world. I quote, "Africa may yet prove to be the spiritual conservatory of the world. Yes, just as in past time, Egypt proved the stronghold of Christianity after Jerusalem fell, and just as the noblest and greatest of the fathers of the Christian church came out of Egypt, so it may be when the civilized nations, in consequence of their wonderful material development, have had their spiritual perceptions darkened and their spiritual susceptibilities blunted through the agency of a capturing and absorbing materialism, it may be that they may have to resort to Africa to recover some of the simple elements of faith, for the promise of that land is that she shall stretch forth her hands unto God," unquote. Bladen's vision was reclaimed in the 21st century, especially under Pope Benedict XVI magisterium. In his apostolic exhortation, Africa Munus, Benedict offered a vision of Africa that stands in striking contrast to that of his predecessor, St. John Paul II. When John Paul II spoke of the continent, he often evoked the parable of the Good Samaritan, presenting Africa as the wounded traveler lying on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, abandoned and in desperate need of pity and compassion. This metaphor, while not inaccurate and while constantly reinforced by breaking and daily headlines, also risks reinforcing negative stereotypes. It can reduce Africans to objects of pity and traits of violence, figures associated with wars, vengeance, historical injustices, as Philip Jenkins has noted. It is a vision that leaves little space for hope within Africans themselves and make them less useful to the global community. That kind of hope instead is celebrated by Pope Benedict XVI in Spe Salvi. For Benedict, Africa is more than its poverty, more than its injustices and violence. It is the spiritual lung of humanity. In Africa Munus, he writes, "A precious treasure is to be found in the soul of Africa, where I perceive a spiritual longing for a humanity that appears to be in a crisis of faith and hope on account of the extraordinary human and spiritual riches of his children, its varied cultures, its soil, and subsoil of abundant resources." Unquote. This is not a naive idealization of Africa by Benedict. He acknowledged the scourge of pandemics of malaria, AIDS, tuberculosis, and other profound challenges facing Africa. Yet, Benedict insisted that Africa, despite these afflictions, continues to radiate a joie de vivre, welcoming life with gratitude, celebrating children, and affirming God's gift of existence. In speaking to the global community, Benedict gave this hope a female face, that of Saint Josephine Bakhita. In Spe Salvi, he presented her as a living icon of the hope that saves. Born in Darfur around 1869, Bakhita was kidnapped at age 9, enslaved, and sold 5 times in the markets of Sudan. In 1882, after being purchased by an Italian merchant, she encountered a radically different master, Paron, the living God revealed in Jesus Christ. She discovered a Lord who had himself been scourged, who had embraced suffering, and who awaited her at the Father's right hand. Bakhita was then baptized, then received First Communion, confirmation, and even later entered the Canusian sisters in Verona. As religious, she became a missionary presence across Italy, proclaiming that the liberation that she had received in Christ was a hope meant for all. Her life testified that true freedom and lasting hope springs not from human masters, but from belonging to God. For Benedict XVI, Bakhita's journey mirrors that of early Christians, many of whom endured slavery, torture, martyrdom, yet radiated a hope rooted in the crucified and risen Christ. The church grew out of this paradox, the paradox of suffering transformed into joy, of despair overcome by hope. Bakhita thus stands as an exemplary witness for Africa and beyond, a sign that Christian hope can flourish even in the most oppressive conditions. Her story embodies what Angel Benvenue described as Africa's contribution to the ecumene, a hope that is not only African, but universal. This message of joy and hope also resonates to a certain extent with Pope Francis in Evangelii Gaudium. The very first paragraph is really beautiful. The joy of the gospel fills the heart and lives of all who encounter Jesus. Those who accept his offer of salvation are set free from sin, from sorrow, inner emptiness, and loneliness. With Christ, joy is constantly born anew. In paragraph 7, the root of such a joy, Francis believed, is in connection with the poor, in truly journeying with them and learning from them their unique trust in God's providence. For those who enjoy life most are those who live security, I'm quoting, who live security on the shore and become excited by the mission of communicating life to others. When the church summons Christians to take up the task of evangelization, she is simply pointing to the source of authentic personal fulfillment, unquote. Therefore, speaking of missionaries, instead of seeming to impose new obligations, they should appear as people who wish to share their joy, who points to a horizon of beauty, and who invite others to a delicious banquet. It is not by proselytizing that the church grows, but by attraction. Paragraph 15. You see that joy here. Huh? Let me conclude. It has been long. A friend of mine recently shared with me a quotation from Voltaire. Appreciation is a wonderful thing. It makes what is excellent in others to belong to us as well. Father Dan Harrington was a wise man, a Nya Modo, because he was a teacher of wisdom. He taught us wisdom. He also checked all the boxes of what it means to be Nya Modo. By letting this debate taking place in his class, he let his students be, treated each of them with kindness and respect, embodying in their midst what true wisdom is. He was like a mother, bettering and mothering us, encouraging us to go deeper in our thought processes, in seeking lady wisdom, speaking within each and all of us, and to all human persons, beyond the political disagreements and the differences of race, culture, and class. By pointing to some aspect of Veng's anthropology from his way of the cross, Africa, and especially African mothers, become the cross raised over the world as a symbol of the hope that saves. And that hope shines brighter exactly because African mothers, unlike any other human group, have suffered the most in history, and yet, in Benedict XVI's word, have retained their joie de vivre. Moreover, Nya Modo, as a mother, is not only the destiny of the individual human person, it is the vocation of all Africans who, as children of Mother Africa, cradle of humanity, still bear the responsibility to give life to all humans, to keep them with her, Africa's mother, and to make them feel at home anywhere, anytime, regardless of their social condition or gender. Children of Mother Africa, we are all called to become good mothers to all men, women, and children of this world, even to those who, having tortured and exploited our ancestors, find themselves away from Lazarus and Abraham as they are in the Sheol. There seemed to be a gap between them and the man in purple clothes. Yet Africa remains their hope, because Africa is by definition a good mother. And like any good mother, as the cradle of humanity, Africa is and will remain the hope for all humans. For she cannot reject any of her children and still remain herself. And there is a woman, there is a mother in each one of us who is to grow as our true vocation, the true way to wisdom. I am coming to you as someone you received as a young student, whom you nurtured with your knowledge, with your love, with your friendship, and in most cases, your motherly care, and whom you are inviting back as worthy to be recognized by you, because you think, maybe wrongly, that he represents the ideals of the school, the Clough School of Theology, ideals which Dan Harrington embodied. Thank you for adding my name to the list. I take it as a distinguished Nya Modo in the list of those who have made and will continue to make history from the halls of this great institution. May God bless you.
Thank you so much, Jean-Luc, for your really, not just an outstanding presentation, but for the heart that you bring, and reminding us of Dan Harrington, what he meant for you, what you mean to us. Really, it's a wonderfully rich presentation, and so we're very, very grateful. And now it's my pleasure to bestow on you the CSTM's 6th Annual Alumni Distinguished Service Award. We're thrilled to honor you as you have embodied the mission of the Clough School of Theology and Ministry so well and so personally in your work and in your mission as a priest, as an educator, as a researcher, as an author, and as the director of the Jesuit Historical Institute in Africa. The good work you are doing in your many ministries will have lasting positive effects in the church and in the world. So, Reverend Dr. Jean-Luc Enyegue, it is my honor on behalf of the Boston College Clough School of Theology and Ministry to award you this Alumni Distinguished Service Award, and we are so proud of you and everything that you do. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Joseph Men. I'm on a sabbatical here at Boston College. I'm an alum not of STM, but of the Theology department, where I graduated many years ago. I want to thank Jean-Luc, who is a fellow Jesuit and a friend. Your lecture is so refreshing. And it's a reminder, but also you are opening other roots, even for us Africans. Now, I don't know if what I will say is provoking, but when you look at some of our languages, especially in terms of pronouns, because this is something that struck me many years ago, where I was always asked, what is my preferred pronoun? Yeah. I think your language is close to my parents' language, where there is no he, she, or whatever, but it's only humanity. The difference is between humanity and the rest. So the moment you are human, you are called in a certain way. How do you integrate that inclusive view in that perspective of Nya Modo? The second thing, I want to be a little bit provocative. You are speaking about the mother. Nya Modo, the mother of man. But what about the father? What about the father? Given that in founding myth, the figure of the father tends to be obscure. Is there still inclusivity here? Or is there something missing? Or how does that image of Nya Modo incorporate the image of the father? Thank you.
Oh. Thank you very much, Joseph Loïc Mbeng of the Society of Jesus, a good friend of mine. So it is okay for you to give me a hard time finding an answer to your question. You know, a friend of mine, we have the same language, and we were in the history department together in Yaoundé. So she heard that I'm coming here and said, what is your presentation about? I sent her the flyer that we have here. And she read what is written there, and she's like, oh, my God, I have been using that word all the time, but I have never thought of it like that. Inclusivity is in the word itself. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, Nya Modo, it really applies to the male elder, not all of them, but certain male elders. Because a woman does not have to prove herself to be motherly. Which means that the father, the good father in society, is actually the Nya Modo. And he will be a good father exactly because the older he gets, the more motherly he becomes. And I think that's where inclusivity is. And my proposal is just like, if now we think as human beings, and that it becomes our calling, all of us, our vocation, that the older we get, the more motherly we should become. I think that it can have a profound transformative impacts in our own societies. Yes, we live in, when you look at the creation myth of the Ewondo, it is actually very, I still have to do some research on the reduction history of that myth, because it looks very much like the book of Genesis translated into Ewondo, in which the woman is the one bringing evil in the world, and the man is there, and everything in that myth that has to do with heaven is masculine, and that everything that has to do with earth is feminine, and the whole history of creation and of the Ewondo and Beti in general is that all of that was united at one point. Even God was part of it. And then because of this disruptive action of a woman who obeyed a small beast, so God ran away. So God separated, and so therefore there is a gap between heaven and earth. But there is certain surrealism in that, because they want to now start believing that God is not really involved in their daily affairs. They are in charge of the world until they get better, worthy enough to have God back. In between, the relationship between heaven and earth are, how do you call it, exogamic. And there is even a rainbow is the one serving as a link between the heaven and the earth. So there is something there about gender roles, which looks like the book of Genesis, and I don't know, most of those who wrote these things were missionaries. It is possible that as they were writing, they were already biblicizing the myth. But when you take a word, a simple word like Nya Modo, it speaks volume to, yes, the genderless that you are talking about, but also the ultimate vocation of a human being in society. We have to become mother, the oldest we get. Even your question is pregnant. Because even the notion of time, it is not linear anymore. It means that time evolves as a return to the source of life. So, which is something that we can research more. I'm just opening the conversation. Hopefully, someone good theologian will take over.
Thank you. I am Tassi. I'm a student. Thank you for the presentation. I will go straight to my question, and I will kind of ask a similar question to the previous one, but I will take it in a very different perspective. Nya Modo is the mother of man, as you said. Now I was a little bit mindful of about those who are not mothers. And if I heard you correctly, you said that those who did not, give birth, like women and so on, are not actually taken into account. Or if I heard you correctly, but my question is, what about those who are not mothers? And if Nya Modo doesn't include women who are not mothers and so on, and people maybe who are not giving birth, how could it, as a concept, help? And if it has to be a framework for a kind of global Christianity, how could Nya Modo help resolve that kind of tension?
Thank you, Tassi, for your question. I actually gave a list of roles played by women in society that are not related to giving birth. Is not. You cannot be pregnant and give birth. So when we say that the Nya Modo male is the mother of man, it actually has to do with caring and nurturing and protecting life. So in those societies, women, even those with no children, they were storytellers, they were healers, they were so they could even become Nyaminga and Nya Modo because of those roles that they play in society. Now, what happens to those Zizamot, which I mentioned? These are, excuse though, we are being recorded, so I cannot say what I want. These are the nobody. Someone can be rich in that society. Someone can even have a huge family, but that person, people in the village will say, this one is Zizamot. Why? Because his heart is not good enough, because he's not caring enough. He is not motherly enough. He is not able to start a village and to sustain tradition in that village. So to a certain extent, yes, that Zizamot is his own judge. And if you have Zizamot who is like, because you can have in that village someone who is really, let's say, who doesn't have all his senses, who is vulnerable, let's say. So the society will be tested as motherly by the care they have for the most vulnerable in that society. And in that sense, I think that I like the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 12, when Jesus is talking about the body, Paul is talking about the body as a body and different members. On verse 22 and 22 and 23, what does he say? The most vulnerable member becomes the more essential of the body, which means that society will be tested as a good society because it is able to take care of the most vulnerable among them, which now will include children, disabled people, etc., etc. This is an intra-African debate.
Thank you very much, Prof, for this wonderful presentation. The question that I have is really related to the presentation of Nya Modo, and actually you mentioned it like this concept or this epistemology is very much important in terms of inclusivity. So I think that right now we are in a synodal church, and it is very much applicable also in the African context. So the question is, how is the African church integrating these values of Nya Modo in the local church, or what can be maybe your take about it? How can the Catholic Church, through the Nya Modo, can be much more synodal? Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. That's another powerful question. It is maybe where I ended, that there is a mother and a woman in each one of us. And that mother is to grow as a way for us to discover our true vocation and the vocation of all humanity. And therefore, if you are able to pay attention to that mother who is in each one of us, and we are able to nurture him and grow in that sense, then the synodality will even be a caring opportunity for all societies and for the church. And maybe that mother in each one of us is not only the fact that we all have mothers, biological. It is also the fact that maybe that Holy Spirit for some is feminine. Jojo.
Sorry to make this an intra-Jesuit debate. I like the Nya Modo and then Nya Meninga. They're mother of man and mother of woman. No? I like the metaphor that you use, mothering. Mothering as giving life, you know. See, also I think there's a value of land. We use land like homeland of our ancestors, no? I just want to know, how do you, by the stretch of imagination, how do you link it to Nya Modo, to land, to Nya Meninga, to land? Land as mothering us. No?
Well, that's a difficult question. From the translation linguistic perspective, there is no direct connection. As ancestor, there is a belief that the ancestor is connected to a particular land. And you cannot be ancestor in that particular society unless you have been Nya Modo in your life. So there is that link there. But it can also be misused. For example, if you go to that same region and you listen the name they give to the president, they call him Mod. And Mod is basically man, a human being. Is Muntu, is in all African cultures. But they call him Modernam, which is, it can have a double meaning. It means the country is his. It can also mean he is called from the country. But it is not synonymous to Nya Modo. Because he has to prove himself to be Nya Modo. Nick. Finally.
I'm gonna ask kind of a different kind of question. I'd like you to just say a few things about the Jesuit Historical Institute in Africa that you run, so that we have a better sense of what it is, and perhaps talk about some of the things that you think are most important that you're doing now, either you personally or the institute itself. I think it would be helpful for us to hear.
Thank you, Mick, for that question. The Jesuit Historical Institute in Africa was created by Father General Adolfo Nicolas in 2010, and it opened in 2012. The idea was exactly in this context of shifting dynamics within global Christianity and global Jesuitism, I may say. Africa was growing, and there were all these questions about coloniality and how to write our own history, and the institute in Rome was to some extent in crisis. So Nicola, reflecting on how to renew that institute in Rome, to revigorate it, gathered some historians, and they were making proposals, including the need to bring in Indians and Africans in Rome so that they can do history and then work in the Historical Institute in Rome. And then he said, why not create those same centers in India and in Africa, so that Africans themselves can write their own history with their own perspective. And when he inaugurated that center, he repeated that same claim. And he even added, saying that the history written by Africans may be very uncomfortable at times, but it is okay. Because if in Europe at the time we were talking of a new evangelization, it means that something not all went well with the first evangelization. And it is therefore good to point out to that, which means that in the publishing side of the Historical Institute in Africa, we can at times be more critical, and the Society of Jesus, in her goodness and compassion, allows us to do that, to be critical. But the work is basically to collect all kinds of resources, archive, documents, books on the history of the society. And because the society is not isolated, we also collect for other religions, Islam. We have a good collection of Protestant sources and things like that, African materials, so that we can write that history in a very contextualized way. So that's what we are doing. We try to publish books and encourage young Jesuits in Africa and Madagascar to take Jesuit studies seriously. An example is that maybe 90% of those writing Jesuit history today are non-Jesuits. They are very competent and all of that, but it is important that the Jesuits themselves keep an eye on it. That's one of it. So documentation, collection, writing, publishing, but also reinforcing structures of archiving in the Conference of Africa and Madagascar. For example, by helping province archives to reform and modernize things like that, giving workshops to train good archivists. I also give workshops to novitiate tertianships. So I am almost always on the road to try to preach the Jesuit identity, because I'm the first to struggle with it. yes.
Okay, one more. Last one, thank you.
Thank you so much, Father. My philosophy of life has always been to be truly African and then authentically Catholic.
Catholic.
Yep. So my question, or rather my concern in this project or theological project of yours is theological legitimacy. Now, there is a gap between theology, now Catholic theology, and also African anthropology. Now, what efforts are African theologians making to bridge this ontological gap between Catholic theology and the African anthropology to avoid the error of anthropomorphism? You know, the danger of an analogy, sometimes when we begin to use this analogy, it could be over-exaggerated. It could be amplified. So what effort, how can we bridge this gap, this ontological gap between Catholic theology and also African anthropology? Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful question. That's the mission of the church to African theologians, to try to inculturate theology the best they can. You know, my great-grandmother, who was a good Catholic, she told her children, and her children told their children, and they told us that our primary identity is to be Catholic before being Ewondo. Nya Modo is an Ewondo concept, eh? So my friend said, your primary identity is to be Catholic before being Ewondo. So there is no conflict with Catholicity in me. And that's what I'm even trying to raise as a question. Like, all the crisis within the Christian communion is not necessarily a faith thing, because it is actually a beautiful thing to travel to Japan without understanding the language and being at Mass and you are following Mass. It is a beautiful, being Catholic is a beautiful thing. Maybe what has always been the challenge is the thing beyond that faith. Why is it that people sharing the same faith, the same creed, the same gospel, how is it that they cannot get along well? So my point I'm making here is that they are not getting along well, not because of the faith, but because there is something, the unknown existing between them, the gap social existing between them, and that if we have to open up about who we really are, the Nya Modo is very typical to me. And I propose it to you, and you are able to see yourself in it. Maybe we'll have a greater communion than just keeping talking about faith. Why can we be Christians and have slaves? So it's not a matter of faith. How can we be Christian and promote colonialism? It is not a matter of faith, because these people love Jesus. They love the Pope. They are good Catholic. But within that communion, something is not working. And I'm trying to fix it through by paying attention to maybe anthropology. You can bring something else. And I want to say that, so I said Afro-globalization, so that Africans are not simply concerned with themselves. Ogbukalu has this to say that what we call inculturation, if you are not careful, can be transformed into villagization, village. So the transfer of village social and mental structure to the modern state, which we are seeing in politics in Africa, but also in the modern church. It is an urgent matter exactly because since 2021 or 3, Gina will tell us, Africa has become the #1 continent on earth. So if you are that large in a community, you also have global responsibilities. And maybe the figure of mother is there to remind us that as we grow, there is a risk also to fall into what happened to the Anglican Communion when the Nigerians became majority. And we start doing to others what we are reproaching their ancestors to have done to us. Maybe if you become modern, then we understand that all these children sharing the same faith with us as our own as well. And therefore, that global perspective will make you also serve them as mothers and listen, welcome them as they are. I may not be answering exactly to your question, but let me stop there. You can write a thesis on that.
Please join me in thanking Dr. Enyegue.